What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Cleveland Pulse YouTube channel. I am your host, Justin Harold, and with me, as always, my co host, Jeff Santa. Today, we are bringing you Browns news, not just in terms of the end of the season and everything that took place, but moving into the future, into the off season. Jeff, this is something that you and I always look forward to because we feel like we get a little bit more out of it than the regular season, even. But how are you feeling about going into this off season before we get back and kind of just take a look back into the 2022-2023 season?
Well, I've tweeted already from our Twitter, and it should be the biggest offseason in the franchise history of the Browns. You might think last year with paying Watson the contract and doing all that would be tough to be topped, but you got to do everything this year to figure it out. If for the sake of Andrew Barry's job, for the sake of Stefanski's job, for the sake of making Watson's contract look anything resembling worth or value, you go out and do everything this year. If if this offseason and next season sets you back a decade, it's a price you pay. And I'm okay with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very I could agree with that. I don't think I will right now, just because I think that was last year. I just think that obviously you go out, you get not just Deshaun, you trade for him and you trade all the assets and whatnot, and then you give him technically you give him the contract with the trade, but you also go out and you get Amari Cooper, which for a 6th round pick, I think we can both agree still beyond beautiful deal. But just and then you lock up and that's the biggest thing I think is you locked up Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb, Wyatt Teller, and Joel Bitonio. Essentially, your core guys for the offense and another defensive piece for the next 4 or like 3 through 5 years. So I think last year was just kind of too big to be topped.
Combination of both years. I mean, obviously you give out a lot of contracts next year. I think or last year, but I think a lot of those were warranted and decent, and it wasn't sure it's going to be big money, but I don't know. I think Chubb was a little bit surprising to us last year. So
Yeah,
maybe what's going to be the surprising play this year as far as somebody who's still on the roster, somebody coming into the roster. And then I think there were some people where if you looked at our videos a year ago from last offseason who just didn't play very well this year, which
right.
obviously we'll talk about, we'll get into and stuff like that. But I just mean as far as like there's no playing it safe with anything this year. You have to explore every single option. I want to hear our names in everywhere. I want to hear them. Obviously,
Trade talks,
yeah, trade
free
talks,
agency, the
coordinators,
draft.
whatever you're going to do to get better, moving up in the draft. Who know? Anything's on the table going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I agree. But before you can ever move forward, you must take a look back. And so, your Cleveland Browns, unfortunately, this season ended up at 7-9. That's not right.
7-10,
7-10. I don't
which
know
looks
why.
weird. Still looks weird. Is this 2 years of 17 games, or is
Yes,
this the third?
it just screws with me. It's a
I think
it's
it's
a
the second.
second. Yeah, I think it's the second as well. But 7-10. Um, again, we got dealt a very weird hand before the season ever started with Deshaun and his situation and what the NFL decided with it, and thus the 11-game suspension. And honestly, I told Jeff, and Jeff, I don't know if you'll remember this, but or you probably will because I think I said it multiple times at the beginning of the season. But if you win that first game of the NFL season for the Browns, I thought it meant everything was going to turn around. I thought it was going to be the beginning, the start, the the alpha, but it wasn't. It
That
wasn't.
is an interesting positive from this season, though. If you could go
Yeah,
2 years in a row of winning the opener, I guess that's cool. I
yeah.
mean, the Jets game kind of as improbable as us winning the opener. The Jets was like even less probable. So that's just how we do it. Back to back weeks.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna take us one by one and just kind of like you know get our like sense for how we were feeling a little bit after each game. Not trying to like drone on too long about each one. But
Right.
first game, obviously Browns versus Panthers. Baker Mayfield, starting quarterback over there. Storyline: Jacoby Brissett. First game, we win 26-24. Cade York hits a field goal for the win, and for a week is the hero. Jeff,
First
what about
first
you?
game was good. First game was great. I had no issues with the first game. It's a good win on the road, home opener, and your 4th-round pick looks like like a genius selection right off the rip.
Yeah.
So it was good. That was probably the second best game of the year.
Me?
Third? No, third. We'll say third.
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
beating Pittsburgh the first time.
That's
Beating
pretty
Pittsburgh in
good.
the first game was 1, and then Cincinnati was second, and then the Panthers game.
Yeah, that makes sense. Moving on to that Jets game, 31-30 is the final score. The infamous 5 minutes of the game that I didn't stay to watch. The Jets came back from what was, let me quickly look at it, 7-14, 17, 30. They came back from 30-14 in 5 minutes. 2 touchdowns, an onside kick, and a field goal. Jeff, disastrous.
Biggest collapse in a single Browns game I've ever seen, and that's saying something going a long way.
Could we say in all the NFL? Do you think there's probably something worse?
There's probably something worse, but nothing I could think of off my.
Yeah.
Honestly, and this is it's just crazy because this was like a really good game, but I thought that the Bills letting Kansas City score in the playoffs last year with however, like what was that, 14 or 17 seconds?
Yeah, like
This was a lot worse. But that was a playoff game, so I don't know.
I completely agree. I think when you think of playoffs, that's probably like at the top for playoffs. But for regular seasons, I feel like there's definitely probably something worse. One or two games that's worse, but that's got to be up there. Like the percentage thing of like what was it, 0.01
at the most.
Anyways, moving on. Like Jeff said as well, we beat the Steelers to go 2-1 on the season. 17-29 was the final score. That was at home. I was at that game. It was, I believe, a Thursday night game.
Yes, prime time.
Very good, very high quality game, and probably one of the better home games to be at this season.
I think that, for sure. I think that if you give, and here we go, because this is going to just sound bad because I'm not saying that the offense was better with Brissett for the most part, for a lot of reasons, mostly because I think he played more games and he had the whole offseason essentially. And I think
hasn't taken a year break of football.
Correct. And I think the weather played a large factor into it. Just the last couple of games with Watson. I don't think Brissett's putting up huge numbers in some of those bad weather games either. But if we could have took the offense from the first 6 weeks and put them together with the defense from the last 6 weeks, that's my ideal season. But we just could never figure it out. The defense sucked the first 9-10 weeks, and the offense sucked the last 6-7 weeks. So good game to beat Pittsburgh, though.
Unfortunately, the only time that's happened was the playoff year that we went, is when they actually meshed.
Yes.
For the last 6 or 8 weeks of that season, but the offense carried them for the first day, and then they made it a difficult task, like they always do. And this year and last year, an impossible task. But Jeff, let's speed it up here. The Falcons game, we lose to Mariota. That's the biggest note here. Cordero Patterson.
Run defense. That's the game that hindsight, and there'll be another upload about this, but that's the game Joe Woods should have been fired right there.
Yep, absolutely. And when you think of the first 4 or 5 games or 4 games, because that's what we were talking about, is what we thought Watson was going to get originally. The Panthers, the Jets, the Steelers, the Falcons. I think, Jeff, we probably went flip-flopped on this in our prediction video. We probably said we were going to lose to the Panthers, we were going to lose to the Steelers, and we are going to beat the Jets and the Falcons.
Right. But we both of us agreed that 3 wins there would have been real nice.
Yeah, and it should have been possible is the biggest thing. But despite that, we move on, and then we get into games that are, kind of more into that spot of like, all right, now it's a competition or the team's better than us. The Chargers, a 30-28 game.
You play good enough to beat them.
We played good enough to beat them.
Typical.
The Patriots, again, for the second year in a row, smoked us 38-15.
Hopefully they're not on our – are they on our upcoming schedule? Are they on next year's schedule? I hope not.
Did they end up in – no.
I just don't want to see them for one season. It would be nice because I hate playing them.
Yeah, we play the Jets next season. So, yes. So, hopefully – well, we won't see them next year. So, the Patriots, see you later. The first Ravens game, 23-20, another game that you play that you could have won. Like Jeff said, like I said at the top, or maybe I didn't even say this at the top. I said this in privacy. Jeff, in our prediction video, talked about how Stefanski coaches a lot of close games to our dismay, and unfortunately turned up again this season. The Bengals, your third rival or your third divisional game here, you smoked them 32-13. The division games, Jeff. At this point, you're 2-1, and you had, I believe, begun to say that this is how it was going to happen, that we were going to go 4-2 in the division and not make the playoffs.
You have a good year in the division, even at 3-3. I mean, that's productive and good enough to get you into the playoffs in a lot of circumstances. But what is the Bengals games? Week 7?
That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Week 8.
Week 8, and the only game that you really get severely outplayed is New England.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like, is it realistic for us to have been 7-1? But could we have been 7-1 through 8 weeks?
We could have been. Yep.
Like, yeah, if like we score a touchdown more in all of our losses.
Yeah. Well, every game in there except for the Patriots
3
game is a
points.
one-score game. Yeah, it's 3 points or less.
So that's the root of your frustration, because let's say if you're the coach or you're the general manager, you look at that and say, okay, if we would have had 4 more points in these games, it's a totally different season and you're in command for like a home playoff game. But that's not the reality. So I'll work with the reality and say it's just disappointing and frustrating that you can't get the job done in a handful of games.
Yeah. Moving on, you have your bye week, and then this is where things get bad/interesting. You get blown out by the Dolphins 39-17.
Sure.
Then you go and you play the Bills. You play a little bit competitive. I believe the score was closer though than what
it really was.
Yeah, so it's 23-31, the Bills, and now you've lost 2 games in a row. And you move on to the Buccaneers, and you get 23-17. The Browns win in overtime. Again, crazy. And now you have Deshaun Watson returns against the Texans. And Jeff, in a game that was 27-14, 0 points were scored by the offense.
It was a nice, it was refreshing actually that our special teams and defense could lead us to victory through, basically the whole season it took.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the easiest game on the schedule to predict. It was always going to be a win, and I'm glad that we didn't, fold that game at least.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We move on to the Bengals' second matchup with us. They beat us 23-10.
Couldn't score.
Yeah, at this point, Watson's still trying to get into it. Also, our center, what we apparently found out this season means a whole lot. Obviously, having J.C. Tretter for the past couple. But, offensive line still kind of dinged up, and we're still struggling a little bit. But, yeah, the offense can't get started here. Then you go next week into Browns versus Ravens, and you win against a Lamar Jackson-less Ravens team, 13-3. So that's your third and final win in the division. You're able to win every game at home, but you can't win any of them at away. What do you think about that?
That's perfect year in the division. I mean, as far as like reality, perfect year is obviously sweep, but that's not realistic. As far as what you want, you just want to win the home games, and hopefully you could steal 1 out of 3 road games. That's really the formula every year for the team. If you have you want 3 wins minimum, anything after that's a bonus. And if you have 1 or 2 wins in the division, you're never making the playoffs. It's going to be very rare, because if you can't beat these teams in the AFC North, you're going to be hard pressed to beat Miami's, Buffalo's, New England's of the world, even up and coming teams like New York. So
Yeah.
I'm fine with beating a team that we should beat because Lamar's hurt, because between the situation, I don't know if Lamar is going to be in the AFC North next season. So that's fine.
Yep. Moving on, I think this is probably one of the more frustrating losses of the season, even though things were already kind of bad at this point. The 17-10 loss against the Saints at home in December, the night before, or I should just say the day before Christmas, but the night before Christmas sounds a little better.
I mean, that's just one of the more embarrassing losses because we should have the advantage. I guess there is no advantage in cold weather if it's windy and like I said, the Atlanta game, Joe Woods should have been gone, but I don't get the incentive to keep Joe Woods after that game. I guess, only there's 2 more games left or whatever, but their running game, there's so many games on the schedule this year where if teams would have had like 50 less rushing yards, I think we probably win.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I don't know. The Sheldon Richardson thing there is also in factor, but I completely agree with you. It should have happened way earlier in the season. So moving on from that, we continued to play, which I was happy, or I was very, what's the word I should use? I was very appreciative is not the right word, but I was very happy that the Browns continued to play, even though that their season was already over. They had no shot at the playoffs. And they beat the Commanders to keep them out of the playoffs 24-10. And then you finish the season off with a very disappointing loss to the Steelers 28-14. Jeff, that's your season in the recap. What are your thoughts?
I mean, the Commanders game was a good win. Pittsburgh, I think that was kind of I don't think we're ever winning that game just based on the circumstances. Yeah, overall, I mean, you easily flip-flop the numbers, and I think 10-7 is realistic, and we're easily in the playoffs.
Yep.
So my issue with the NFL is that that's all good and, nice to say, and it's like, oh, maybe we won't fold games like that next year. It's very realistic and possible that we fold games like that next year. So it's not like one thing, and realistically, if you have the ball bounce a couple of different ways, are you in the playoffs this year? Sure, but you don't really want to rely on that. You just want to play good football and just play competently every single week and
win outright.
At least your positives are winning week 1, and you kind of limit games where you're not competitive in. You have, you're not really competitive in the Buffalo game, even though the score was close, and you're not really competitive in the Miami game, and you get blown out by New England. 3 out of 17 games, maybe 4 out of 17 games, the second Cincinnati game, you're like, oh, the game was never kind of really in reach. I guess that's a stepping, stone to look at and be like, hey, we were competitive for most of the season. Like you said, the last 2 games, at least we were still trying, it seemed like.
Yeah. Jeff, last couple of things before we move on, or, finish this video. What are your thoughts with the offense moving forward? Do you think, and I know that you and I have texted, privately about some things, but do you think the offense stays the same but leans more into a passing game? Or do you think the offense changes completely and, whatever assortment of, run and pass we get, but just in different formations with different personnel? What do you think will happen with the offense moving forward?
I think the playbook totally changes. I think the whole scheme gets redone, or we're going to be in trouble, because if it's the same scheme and playbook that we saw these last 4 games, I don't think that's getting the job done with all the factors included even. And I think in the AFC North, you kind of have to reverse course, especially with the franchise quarterback, in that you might as well use the good weather to your advantage the first 8, 9, 10 games of the year. And then you could turn around and lean on your run game when there's 25, 30 mile an hour winds, is snowing and raining and all that stuff at the end of the year. Right. I felt like Chubb was gassed by about week 12 this year. The last 5 games, he had moments where he was himself, and he had some games where he just really didn't look like himself. So I think it's Watson's offense now. It's always been Nick Chubb's offense and
Right.
the offensive line's offense first with Brissett, with Baker. Now it's Watson's offense. You're paying the big bucks for him. So, are we going to see games where he throws 40 times a game? I would assume.
Yeah, you gotta at least think that in situations where we would typically run a ball, in my mind, the perfect game that we always thought about was you get up early
Mm-hmm.
before halftime and you run the clock out, But that's not typically the way you go about winning games anymore in the NFL.
Right.
Everyone's a passing team. Everyone passes heavy. You just got to stick with the pass game because you want to build the lead. Sometimes it might seem like you're running up the score, but in reality, you have to because teams can come back. And we've seen it all season. We saw it all season long. We've seen teams come back from 17, 20, 24. It's not unlikely. So to be able to say, hey, Deshaun Watson needs to be, not setting records, but at least, going above the bar of a Baker Mayfield or Jacoby Brissett, in the past, because in the past decade, those are probably two of the – it's crazy when you think about it. In the last decade, those are probably the two best quarterbacks that you can go back and be like, hey, be better than these two. So
absolutely.
But, no, I completely agree with that. Obviously, we're going to talk about the defensive stuff later. Do you wish that the Browns had made any more coordinator decisions in terms of OC or special teams?
I mean, I think that they kind of are just shooting themselves in the foot, not at least trying to be like, okay, we might look for an OC. I think that you garner, and they don't care about this. I promise you they don't. This is just a fan thing, and people who talk about the organization thing, they don't really care about they care about the fans, I guess, but they don't want to, their whole jobs don't revolve around appeasing the fans. But I don't know what is stopping Andrew Berry and them coming out saying, hey, we're going to pursue an offensive coordinator this offseason if it's the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're lying, even if it's fake, if they can't find anybody, okay, Stefanski still calls the plays. What negative does that do to the fan base of the organization? Maybe you find an offensive coordinator you really like, so Stefanski could actually be the head coach. But I guess
it's kind of like the Baker situation last year.
I guess Prefer's job
each
right,
coordinator,
right, and you have Van Pelt on the staff. So if you got rid of Van Pelt and just did nothing, I think that would make a lot of sense. Or if you were like, okay, we're going to try to maybe fill this, we're going to get rid of Van Pelt, then fill it. I don't know. I guess Prefer's job is fine, but I didn't think he did. I think he was about a C grade for the whole season.
I thought he did exactly what Woods did, but Woods ended up getting fired anyway. So I thought he was honored too. Right. But
it's a good year it's a good offseason for coordinators, I feel like really good. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, no, I agree. Jeff, those were my final questions for you on this season. Do you have anything that you want to say or ask before we call this one quits to sum it all up?
No, I don't think so. I think just be on the lookout for stuff that maybe is unexpected. Expect the unexpected is my slogan for this offseason.
That's Jeff's little way of trying to tell you guys to be on the watch for DeAndre Hopkins.
Correct.
Correct. So just to let you all know what he was hinting at there. So, but no, everyone, if you made it this far and through the season, not even this video, just the season, and the video. Please make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, hitting the bell notification, and leaving us comments. Tell us what your honest thoughts of this season were. Obviously, Jeff and I disappointed, but we knew the circumstances. We knew what was going to happen, and unfortunately, there's always next year, but that is just the case as of right now. So with that all being said, we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.